Welcome to Meet the Ocean.
Meet the ocean! Meet the ocean.
Welcome to another episode of Meet the Ocean. I'm your host, Paul North, and today's episode is all about the penguins. And the reason for this is because it's World Penguin Day. Because April 25th of every year marks a day when we focus on these little birds. Now, I know you might think you know penguins. You've seen them on the t-shirts, you've seen them in the zoo, you've seen them in the movies dancing with their happy feet. But what do we really know about penguins? Do we know how many there are? Do we know how they live, what they eat, or even how they breed? These are some of the questions that we are going to explore today, and I guarantee we'll find some interesting answers. Now at this point it probably feels like everything has a day, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches included, but if you think about it, Antarctica isn't even featured on many of our world maps, and I personally think that's a problem. Think about what that does to our mentality, how we think about the Southern Ocean, or whether or not it even exists.
Meet the ocean.
First of all, we should find out where penguins got their name. And coincidentally, this actually came from a bird that wasn't a penguin at all. It was the great auk, spelled A-U-K. And the great auk was a flightless bird in the alcid family. Now, alcids are amazing diving birds. You already probably know some alcids like the puffin or maybe a pigeon guillemot. Birds largely known in the Northern Hemisphere because largely the Northern Hemisphere was explored first. So explorers came upon the auk and they saw that it had a black back and a white belly. This is exactly what penguins look like, except no one knew what penguins were at that time. So when the explorers started to travel down south of the equator into the Southern Hemisphere, and they started to run across these birds that had black backs, that had white bellies, and couldn't fly. Of course they thought, well, this is much just like the auk. So that's how the penguins got their name, from the great auk. And if we look at the great auk's scientific name, its genus is Penguinus. Unfortunately, the great auk is now extinct. It happened in the 19th century and ended a run for this bird species that lasted several million years. And if we start to trace things back that far, we find that there used to be penguins as big as a human, just as tall and just as heavy. Meaning those happy feet were probably about a size 12. Think about that for a second. Now largely, penguins are restricted to the Southern Hemisphere, and most of them spend their time in the polar regions of Antarctica or the subpolar regions just around them. But the thing about it is, there's probably a lot more than you've actually considered. In fact, the first time that I ran into a penguin outside of a zoo, it was a very unexpected experience. I was 21 years old and I had just arrived in Cape Town, South Africa. Convincing a local motorcycle shop that I actually had a license back in the US, I was able to rent a bike and drive down to the Cape of Good Hope. And why wouldn't you? It's where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean. Because of this, there's lots of food, and of course that means there's lots of wildlife. Always a chance that you might even see some whales just offshore, feeding in the turbulence. But on my way down on a very scenic drive, we stopped at a few places. And one of those was a beach. But it was who was occupying that beach that I found so strange. Hordes and hordes of African penguins. Now wait a second. Nobody told me that there were penguins in Africa. Arguably one of the hottest continents on our planet. I found it very perplexing that all these small little birds were waddling along the beach. And with their speckled bellies and pink coloration around their eyes, they were adorable. And there were hundreds of them. But this, like any discovery, had me asking a lot more questions. Because when you dig in, you actually find out that there are nearly 18 penguin species on our planet.
Emperor penguins, king penguins, little blue penguins, macaroni penguins, yellow-eyed, royal, rockhopper, Magellanic, Humboldt, Galapagos, Fiordland, erect-crested, chinstrap.
They're all characters, every single one. And the ones we've met most often here are the brush-tailed penguins. Most of these are black and white, but they've all got distinguishing features, which are basically, the form of the head and the beak. And the Gentoo penguin has got wonderful little white patches on the side of its head, as if it's got earphones, listening to beautiful music. And also, it's got a beak which has a wonderful, vivid orange stripe all the way down the beak. It looks like it's just gone bonkers on lipstick. In fact, the old sailors said it used to remind them of the Gentoo dancers of the west coast of India. It's what it reminded them of. You know, the Indian dancers used to put a lot of bright colours on themselves. They called this the Gentoo penguin after these dancers they'd seen in India. The other one is a really smart little penguin called a chinstrap. It's the feistiest of the penguins. It seems to have a very short temper. It gets very aggressive and it'll really peck you if you get too close to the nest. But it has a smart little black cap and a neat little strap under the chin, which is where the chin strap name comes from. In Russian, they call it the policeman penguin because of this little hat. And in South America, they call it barbijo. And the barbijo is the strap with which the gaucho riders used to hold their little flat hat on their head. So that's a real character too. But our favorite here, and the one we've seen this morning, along with the emperor, is the ultimate little ice specialist, which is the Adélie penguin, named by a French explorer for his delightful French wife, Adèle. He missed her so much when he was down here, he named the penguin after her. Adélie penguin. It's a little black and white thing packed with energy, and it's almost like a tiny little clockwork toy that runs on the most durable batteries you've ever put in a machine like that. It just trots in Charlie Chaplin style across the landscape. It never stops. It would rather jog rather than walk. If it's downhill, it would rather toboggan rather than to step downhill, and it's busy all the time because here, where the ice is, and it feeds under the ice, in the coldest part of Antarctica, the summer is short and you've no guarantee that you will have any advantage when you can collect krill, and so they really have to go at it. They're totally focused, hardwired to get the job done. And we love that energy, and all the explorers love that perseverance and that stamina, because they too knew if you didn't get on and do work, the chances are you wouldn't survive and get through the expedition. So they really admire this heroic little penguin, black and white, a lovely white eye ring, and a permanently frustrated expression because he's always short of time.
Meet the ocean.
Penguins. They're cute, waddling, flightless birds that everyone loves. In a recent poll, conducted by me, 100% of 12-year-old girls said that they would like a penguin as a pet. There's just something about penguins that makes you happy. The children's movie about penguins, Happy Feet, made almost $400 million in box offices and won an Academy Award. But there's a different side to penguins that few have heard of, a darker side. In the few parts of coastal Antarctica that aren't completely covered in ice, around 5 million adorable little male Adélie penguins are building their nests. Sounds good, right? When the females return, the males will need to attract them, and to do that, they'll need a decent nest. The building materials for these nests are stones, and finding a good stone that a penguin can carry in its mouth successfully is hard. So, as expected, these seemingly innocent penguins will turn to a life of crime. As a harder-working penguin travels long distances just to get single pebbles, perhaps another penguin who hasn't had such good luck pebble-wise might look over his shoulder, a mischievous glint in his small, beady eyes. He sees a large nest already filled with hundreds of pebbles. He subtly waddles over to the nest, leans down, and picks up a pebble, and then another, and so on, until the other penguin's nest is almost completely empty. So, criminal penguins, if you're listening to this, hear me out. This pebble stealing is not a victimless crime, and it has gone too far. So I beg of you, penguins, have mercy. This was Charlotte Fisher. Have a good penguin day.
So what do penguins eat when they're swimming for miles and miles underneath the water? They will certainly eat fish, and also are known to eat squid. But primarily in the Southern Ocean, a penguin's food source is krill. Do you know what krill is? Think of it like a cousin of shrimp. It doesn't have any claws with which to pinch or to prod, but rather something that's known as a feeding basket. And these krill provide a most essential role for the ecosystem of the Southern Ocean. When we're having our winter in the Northern Hemisphere, Antarctica experiences what's known as an austral summer, and that means there's a lot of sunshine. And with a lot of sunshine means a lot of photosynthesis is taking place for any of the plants that are there. But in Antarctica, there's hardly any plant life on the actual continent itself. So that means that most all of it is in the water. Small, single-celled organisms known as diatoms, which are harvesting the sun's energy and growing in such vast numbers that they are impossible to count. And that is what krill eat. And krill are what penguin eat. Pretty simple, right? Well, yes, until something else comes along. Something known as a human. For the last several decades, many different countries have been going down into the Southern Ocean and fishing for krill. A majority of what is caught is used to feed farmed fish in the Northern Hemisphere. But we've also discovered that krill have a high amount of omega-3s in them. And omega-3s are very sought after because they're said to improve our health, not only in our bodies, but in how our brains function. So of course many people want to take omega-3s, and there are a variety of ocean sources that provide it. But in taking it from krill, and taking those krill out of the waters of the Southern Ocean, we're essentially stealing from penguins. And come on, who wants to steal from penguins? This is by no means a small issue, and there's a lot of hard work being done to educate and enlighten people to the situation in the Southern Ocean. Leading this charge is the Pew Charitable Trust, because it's not enough to think that penguins are just cute. We need to make sure that they are able to live their lives without our interference. And if you'd like to know more about the global penguin conservation movement, and if you yourself want to become a penguin defender, then you can learn more at pewtrust.org/penguins. That's pewtrusts.org/penguins. Many and much thanks to Ian Bullock for sharing his penguin knowledge, for our creature feature reporter Charlotte Fisher, and the Portland musical artist Vin Gass for sharing his tunes. Thanks, everybody.